140 years ago, the United States created a monster that nearly destroyed us. It took our land, polluted our environment, poisoned our towns and families, and corrupted our economy. Industrial agriculture took on a life of its own, feeding on synthetic chemicals, fossil fuels, and government subsidies. It grew stronger as our numbers increased. More people demanded more food, and so they fed the beast more of our precious resources. Until one day, we could no longer keep up with its demands. Food became scarce, water in some places was too toxic to drink, and we were forced to import or treat what we could. Fields grew barren, and the infamous dust clouds of the 1930s tore across the land. It all seemed so hopeless until communities started to band together. We worked to rehabilitate the agricultural system, not in its singular monstrous state, but through smaller community-based agriculture, one that focused on food produced within the community for the community. Food that didn't travel thousands of miles away from a farm that doused it in chemicals.
Reporting for Channel 10 News. On this week's segment of Sustainable Living, we meet a mother of two with a family of four who is a USDA supervisor for community agriculture.
In the year 2070, there's no markets. There's just these community gardens everywhere. They provide food for the whole neighborhood. This one specifically about 3 families of food, including the house next door and the house on the other side.
Donna Gaglione of West Warwick, Rhode Island, invited us into her home today to give us a day in the life of what community agriculture looks like in 2070 and how it has benefited us. We asked her why preserving our food is important for agriculture and how her community works.
So I am preserving the harvest that I've gotten so far this summer, and I am preserving beets, and this will give us a surplus of food for our winters as well as in the future. Using the food day to day for our daily meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, we preserve everything that we produce. That way there is no food waste, because we couldn't possibly eat everything that we produce. So my garden in this area produces enough food for my neighbors on each side of me. So it takes care of 3 families. The health of the American people has actually improved with the sustainability that we have now, because everything is grown from the earth. It's all natural. It's more organic food. We're not putting any insecticides or chemicals on anything that we are producing.
Donna then took us out to her garden to show us her community's fruit of their labors. Here we see a summer squash. There's also peppers, cucumbers, zucchinis. Oh, and there's me falling mark. Yes, I should have not worn those heels. She also let us pick some tomatoes and take them home. The news station thanks you, Donna. I had to ask Donna when the last time she went to a grocery store was, seeing they closed in 2046.
So the last time I went to a grocery store was probably in 2040. And because now that we're sustainable and we do all of our own food, there are no food miles that we have to worry about. Because we have the advantage of living in Rhode Island, which is on the coast and the ocean's not far from us, we would go down to the docks to pick up our seafoods. So just as well as I'm doing my vegetables with my neighbors and sharing that garden, there are other families that have cattle and pigs and chickens. So they will be producing more of the eggs and the proteins, living in a more sustainable environment, that the vegetable, that more people more veggie based than meat based.
Thank you to Donna Gaglione for showing us her community garden in West Warwick, Rhode Island.
Thank you.
So nice to meet you today.
Hello.
welcome to another episode of The Green Retrospective, a series that examines environmental policies of the early 21st century. I'm joined tonight by a very, very special guest, the head of the United States Department of Agriculture, Ms. Imogen Huntington III. Thank you for being here tonight, Ms. Huntington. Oh, please, call me Miss III. Very well. So, Miss III, what does the USDA look like today compared to the year 2019 when the Green Revolution began? Well, at the time, the USDA was actually almost dismembered. When we moved into a more sustainable venture, I was head of the Seattle division of the American Farming Association, and we started to really push community gardens at the time. Interesting. And what incentives did you create to get people to grow their own food nationwide? Well, once we had these tax breaks statewide, in Washington, for anyone who contributed to the sustainable food sources, California caught on, and then the rest of the country followed, and it became pretty normalized there. And once that became normalized, it became standard procedure. Yes, and people were really desperate for any kind of tax benefit to offset the detrimental effect that the past president's trade wars had on the country's economy. And from there, it led not only to a dialogue, but also an education system for schools. So now Gardening 101 and Nutrition 101 are taught as early as second grade, and those are taught in the school's very own community gardens. Well, I suppose it helps to set down roots early. Never too early to plant the seed of knowledge. Now, one of the aspects of the community gardening projects has been to break up the land into manageable sections. Can you tell me about that? Yes. People sign up to become a community supervisor, and they receive need based off of the size of the land that they're providing for and the household size. Fascinating. And how do locals find a community space for themselves? A household can sign up for land space and be matched with the closest garden in their community. So that household also receives a sustainability tax credit for their participation in green food production. Absolutely smashing. It's so nice to live in the year 2070 where all the concepts and legislations have been passed and we no longer need to live in fear of total starvation or climate destroying Armageddon. It is such a benefit to enjoy the benefits of our predecessors from 2019 who worked tirelessly to make their future our reality. I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much for being here again, Miss III. Charmed, I'm sure. Join us next week on The Green Retrospective, where I'll be sitting down with a man who in 2024 dared to put bacteria on his body and not take a shower for 13 years. Thank you, and good night.
Pre-development target is to have a government-mandated labeling of place of origin for all produce, create a system to accurately record data in terms of distance food travels to consumers, incentivize local community-based farming management, as well as educate the public about the impacts of food miles. Takeoff acceleration target is a 20% decrease in food miles and a goal of not exceeding 200 food miles by year 20. The stabilization target is to see food miles successfully reduced to a sustainable level, the elimination of food waste, as well as a goal that by year 50, carbon emissions will be eliminated from food production and transportation.
White-tailed deer typically reside within 1/2 to a 3 square mile area for their entire lives in communities that may near a population of 30. Although the area may not be particularly large, They are able to sustain themselves off of the herbaceous plants that fall within these boundaries. We draw inspiration from these deer by implementing local farming facilities that cater to the immediate community rather than relying on import or migration. In the winter months, where food resources can be scarce, the deer survive by consuming remaining twigs and roots for more abundant seasons. Often, the amount of foliage available at this time of year may not be enough to support all 30 deer, and some may not survive the winter. Similarly to this habitat, farming facilities have the ability to dictate the carrying capacity of this community as the resources are not infinite, thus resulting in the stabilization of the population. When it comes to maintaining water and soil quality as well as nutrient cycling, we look to the Earth's most thriving land-based ecosystems, such as tropical rainforests and rolling grasslands. Without human interference, the natural environment is able to recycle nutrients into the soil using the remains of deceased animals and plants. Untouched ecosystems are able to support their own fertility as well as survive off of water provided through the ground and rainwater. A thriving ecosystem is self-sufficient, self-regulating, and ever-evolving in order to produce the most abundance the land is able to support. Their success can be attributed to biodiversity and perennialism. Evidence shows that mimicking these natural ecosystems on even deeply degraded soils, such as land previously subject to monoculture or even coal mines, can assist in eliminating the need for fertilizers, pesticides, and additional harmful chemicals that were once used in traditional farming methods.
Rebuilding in the wake of the agricultural giant was a slow process. In order to get the land to produce, we also needed it to heal. Vacant fields were replanted with local ground covers such as alfalfa, clover, and peanut, as well as trees. These plants would return much-needed nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus to the soil, as well as aid in water retention and prevent soil erosion. As fields were replanted, the dust storms dissipated. Utilizing many local plants in the rehabilitation process kept the costs low, thereby encouraging the growth of community-based management. Producers of the past plundered resources of one region and shipped food hundreds of miles away, creating unsustainable food miles. Determined not to repeat the mistakes of the past, communities began to mandate place of origin labeling of all foods. All surviving farms and future growers were required to label the state or even county of origin on their packages. To further the impact of the labeling mandate, grocers selling produce could not advertise foods as locally grown unless they originated within the state or within 100 miles of the region grown. Education about food production became integrated into all school curriculum, as well as spread through public educational functions in order to increase awareness of the benefits of buying local for health, ecological, and economic reasons. By buying local, consumers could easily see how foods were being produced, its environmental impacts, and economic output. As the land healed, small-scale holistic-based farms began to emerge. Some used the methods of permaculture, while others used the methods of aquaculture and hydroponics. A combination of aquaculture and hydroponics became the most predominantly used method because of the ability to produce foods in a controlled environment, limiting the need for pesticides and herbicides, since many were still too expensive for new generation producers and were ineffective anyway due to decades of artificially created resistance. The place of origin mandate proved successful in providing data which showed a 20% decrease in food miles traveled since its inception. Data was acquired from retailers as they balance and adjust their produce orders based upon the demands of that region. The more local foods purchased, the more local foods ordered by the retailer, a direct correlation. The increase in local aquaponic hydroponic operations provided more direct produce options, helping to offset the need to import foods from other states. As the new generation producers grew in size and capabilities, the more food miles were anticipated to decrease. The end goal? All food being produced within 200 miles of the consumer by the end of a 20-year total span. Education and community self-interest continued to drive community-based management and the relocalization of food. It has been 50 years since the collapse. Community-based management has proven to be an effective tool in relocalizing our food sources. Small aquaponic hydroponic farms have given way to large-scale, fully automated operations. These facilities are able to produce food in regions where soil quality, Water availability or climate make traditional farming methods impossible, as well as increase the variety of produce not naturally available to the region. The environmental impact of these automated producers is negligible compared to the traditional method that caused the collapse due to accuracy in distribution of nutrients and resources, as well as a reduced amount of human intervention. Communities now have a secure food source, and the time we once dedicated to food scarcity we can now use to address the additional aspects of the cradle-to-grave food system, food waste and CO2 emissions, and move away from food miles as an indicator. The relocalization of food solidified food security through sustainable methods. However, food delivered by multiple small vehicles within a small community can have a similar carbon emission output as a tractor-trailer carrying tons of food across thousands of miles. Green transportation options such as electric fleets or trams could serve as a way to reduce carbon emissions. Food waste has been reduced in the growing and transport process because of the close proximity from producer to consumer, but it still plays a contributing factor in household and commercial waste, such as restaurants or cafes. Community-wide compost facilities and services will be implemented to curb our food waste.